All right, welcome back everyone to the Diamond Vogel Studios as we continue on our preseason discussion of the 2024 college football season. We are now talking about the Michigan Wolverines in greater detail. Last time we discussed Michigan's outlook on offense. We called that kind of a remodeling year. What would you call this year on defense, Jericho, as we look at the other side of the ball?
Run it back year.
The run it back year. So significant changes in the personnel on the coaching front.
Yeah.
Defensive coordinator Jesse Minter went with Jim Harbaugh to the San Diego Chargers, now the Los Angeles Chargers. Who knows what they'll be in the future? And took with him Steve Clinkscale, Mike Elston, the rest of the crew. So it's a whole new wave of coaches at Michigan on the defensive side of the ball. Wink Martindale, the architect of the offense, or rather the defense that Michigan has run over the last few years, comes from the NFL to take over on that side of the football. Brian John Marie back at linebackers coach after a stint down south at Tennessee. Lamar Morgan is a secondary coach. And then Lou Esposito takes over the defensive line. And there are solid players at each one of these levels. Let's start on the back end. The headline, of course, is Will Johnson.
Yeah, the unanimous All-American, probably the first pick off the board. Arguments could be made with Will Campbell and some other guys, but Will Johnson is looking like he could be the number one overall draft pick in next year's draft.
He seems like destined for the top 10 for sure.
Yeah,
maybe number one.
It
just depends what teams need.
Correct, and I think that with Will Johnson out there, it's such an important piece of the defense because it's something where you could scheme some other kind of zone or some complete other defense, but you can leave him on an island against any receiver on the country. And I think that's such a valuable part to have on a defense to where you can just be like, yeah, Will, you can go guard their best player, their fastest player, their tallest player, and leave them out on the island. Now the question comes in, who's going to be cornerback number 2 on the opposite end? I think probably McBurrows.
Well, I think most people think it's going to be Jair Hill at this point. Amir Hall's a transfer in from Albany who had been running with the first team earlier, but it seems like he's been passed by the younger and much more athletic and much higher upside homegrown player, Jair Hill, kid out of Kankakee, Illinois. Big kid, they call him Sugar Hill, and he's really hopefully destined for great things if he can understand the physics of the game and the mental side of the game. But McBurrows, as you mentioned, is in the mix as another probably nickelback. We think Zeke Berry probably has the starting nickelback position held down. I like Zeke Berry. I think he is the player that most people will learn about more than any other defensive player this year. I think they're going to see a lot of number 10. A Mikey Sainristil type position that he plays, in which he's blitzing sometimes, back in coverage other times. You just have to account for him. I think I said to you, he's a good guy to have the green dot on his helmet because he'll be right in the middle of the field and can see a lot of things happen.
Words you will be hearing far more often, and words that will be hearing more than any other time in your entire life. The green dot player.
Who's got the green dot?
Who has the mic in the helmet?
It could be Ernest Hausman at middle linebacker as well. We're not sure, but Zeke Berry is certainly a great candidate. So behind them, number of other transfers have come in that will figure into the mix as well. A couple of younger players, but those are the names that you're going to see most of the time at the corner position and at the nickel position. Now, if you look back to the safeties, a couple of devastating blows in the offseason. First, the transfer of Keon Sabb to Alabama, and then the injury to Rod Moore. Rod Moore expected to miss most, if not all, of the season. I don't think anyone is really planning on him being part of the 2024 team. You never know how things can go with rehab medicine these days, but it's possible end of the season or perhaps in the playoffs if Michigan should qualify. Who is there is Makari Page, back after a number of years as a strong contributor. And then Quentin Johnson. Quentin had kind of checked out from Michigan, but after the injury to Rod Moore, he was convinced to come back and take what essentially is his COVID season, probably. He did have another year of eligibility, so he is back as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm really comfortable with the same position. Not too much to say there. Going into the season before Keon Sabb transfer, it was looking like it was going to be one of the deeper and more talented safety rooms in the country. And now, I mean, I'm content with having Makari Page and Quentin Johnson back there, especially when Quentin will light up and make a Ibuka in the Ohio State game. If he can play like that, I will be just fine with who we have playing on the back end there.
Yeah, Michigan will face some really strong passing attacks this year. Certainly, Oregon and Texas. Ohio State always has the receivers. The question is, do they have the quarterback who can deliver the ball this year? And Will Howard. I happen to think Ohio State will try other quarterbacks this year as well because they want to be able to push the ball down the field. So whether it's Julian Sayin or Aaron Noland, one of these true freshmen, or someone else in the mix, I do think that they will experiment with people besides Will Howard to see what Chip Kelly can figure out.
It could
there.
be a situation where you're trying to train kids because Will Howard's also in his 18th season in college football, so get ready for the next generation.
Yes, absolutely. So we think the secondary is fairly strong. Again, there's not a ton of depth. The number of transfers were brought in to shore it up, as we said. So Michigan does have to be careful with injuries, but I think the secondary is good. The linebackers also on the thin side. I think this is going to be a recurring theme, but a good set of 2.5 or 3 starters, depending on what kind of defense they go into and where Zeke Berry plays. That half starter I would consider to be Jimmy Rolder, a guy who was really a player Michigan was very excited to land, former Iowa commit, Illinois kid as well. He came to Michigan, and they were very positive about him, but he had a pretty significant injury season last year. But he's back.
Yeah.
And he's the half guy. The other 2 guys are very solid, and Ernest Hausman and Jay Sean Barham.
Mm-hmm. Barham, one of like JJ's 4 picks last year in the Maryland game. Kind of just trying to draw him over to Michigan, trying to recruit him. I think that Barham will be very disruptive in the run game for sure. He's such a big body, such an athletic body, that he's really just going to have to work on his pass defense and his own defense and reading the QB's eyes. Probably playing maybe some edge, depends on defense, obviously. But and then you have Ernest Hausman, who's probably got one of the highest ceilings of anybody in the defense, being only, would it be, third year? Going into his 3rd year of college football.
1 at Nebraska and 2 at Michigan.
High upside. I'm really looking forward to watching Hausman especially this year and see what he can become.
See, I'm more excited to watch Barham. I think that Barham brings an element of speed and physicality that Michigan linebackers have not had for at least since Devin Bush with the speed levels. So I agree with you. I think Barham will be moved around the field. I think he's the kind of player that quarterback, the opposing side is going to be coached. Hey, watch out for that guy. Where is he? Locate him on the field and understand where he is, because I think he's going to heat up a lot of quarterbacks this year. He could be one of Michigan's leaders in sacks by the time this is all said and done.
Sure.
Michigan has brought these 2 guys in via transfer with Hausman and Barham. They have not recruited linebacker well. One player that could prove to be the exception is Cole Sullivan, true freshman who enrolled early. Really turned a lot of heads in the spring game, and I think Michigan's very high on his future. And I think he's a guy you'll see get in some of those second halves of games that Michigan has it under control. Someone that probably will be a starter for 3 years at Michigan. Really, really fun to watch. A solid, rugged, physical linebacker that Michigan is super high on for the years to come. Then we go to the defensive line, and this is where I think most people are very excited because Michigan, except for Florida State, of course, may have the best defensive line.
I don't know. They got shoved around in Ireland, man.
The joke was in the pregame broadcast yesterday. NFL players were telling Pete Thamel that Florida State had the best defensive line in the country, and then they just got bulldozed by the Georgia Tech offensive
Jamal
line.
Haynes, baby.
So Michigan brings back 2 of the perhaps 5 best defensive tackles in the country. That might be underselling a little bit, with all due respect to Deion Walker and a couple other players. But Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Mason Graham, a technician, just a wrecking ball from the middle of the field, number 55. Just was looking today at the play he made in the third to last play of the Rose Bowl, was it? Where he got in the backfield and took out the tailback there. He was wearing a club for parts of the season that didn't even seem to slow him down. Just an absolute force. And again, you're looking at a first-round draft pick here and probably a first-team All-American.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to run the ball, especially it's going to be impossible to run the ball from the middle when both of these guys are on the field. I'd say probably Kenneth Grant has higher upside, higher ceiling, but right now Mason Graham is the better player, and he's also looking to be a very high draft pick, and he is another unanimous All-American. Grant's still kind of hanging around the third team, but Mason Graham is going to have everybody's attention on,
Yeah.
the
Kenneth Grant reminds me a
line.
lot of a former Michigan defensive tackle named Alan Branch, another big guy, but I think Grant is more athletic. Um, we've seen him running up and down the field and showing some significant speed there. There's talk that he runs a sub 540,
That'd
which
be
is like,
absurd.
wow, for a guy that big.
That'd be incredible.
So Michigan is set at defensive tackle. We look behind them at guys like, Etta perhaps, and a couple of these Iwunas. There's an Iwuna and an Awuna that we'll learn about, because you can't keep Grant and Graham on the field all the time. But when they're on there, they're going to be a force to be reckoned
Yeah,
with.
third guy's looking to be Rayshon Benny probably. Just
Yeah, Rayshon Benny, again, a guy who's been in the program for a number of years, Michigan kid. And he's really would be a starter on a lot of Big Ten teams as well.
right.
On the edges, we have Josiah Stewart, who came in last year from Coastal Carolina, high school teammate of Mike Sainristil, and then Derek Moore. And I think Derek Moore is someone who's set to really just blow up this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that returning those two guys back from last year's team is huge, because then you have guys on both tackles, as opposed to where you can kind of slide your line to where double team just Josiah Stewart. Now you really have to focus, kind of going one-on-one. I think that's going to be very advantageous for Michigan pass rushing. Both these guys are looking to compete with breaking Michigan sack records for combos. It'd be really hard to duplicate what Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo did in 2021. But I think these guys can make a push for it. You talk about Josiah Stewart. He was one of the best players in the Sun Belt before he came and played in Michigan and had a huge part there. The thing is, neither of these guys started last year.
Yeah, well, you had Braden McGregor, you had Jalen Harrow.
Everybody got the same snaps, but
If they didn't start, they ended games.
Right,
Which is even more important.
Yeah, they were definitely in the rotation. Derek Moore, like you said, he could really explode this year too. So it's going to be a long day for offensive lines this year against Michigan.
Yeah, Derek Moore. I think that you look at Josiah Stewart, he reminds me of a guy who played at Michigan, Mario Ojemudia, a few years ago. Derek Moore, I'm trying to think of the comp. He's not Lamar Woodley. He's not that good. He reminds me a little bit of Prescott Burgess, who played a little more linebacker, but just a physical force on the line. And I'm excited for what Derek Moore can do in this year. Behind them, again, some other rotation players. Cameron Brandt will probably be in there from time to time, and maybe a couple of freshmen like Devin Baxter will get in there. But again, I think at all three levels, Michigan has a very clear and very strong starting unit, and just behind them, there's not much proven.
Right.
Michigan knows what they're looking for when they recruit. They have lost a number of linebackers to transfer, but they've supplemented via the portal as well. So we think this could be one of the best units in the country. Michigan's offense is not going to be anything to write home about. Their defense should be very, very good. They're not going to be Iowa, but
they might be like Iowa on another planet.
The
same type, win games 23-7, but they will be beating like USC 23-7 and not Northwestern 23-7. Different competition.
Yeah, one of the questions that has been raised is, will Wink Martindale be more aggressive on the blitzes? We know that his predecessors, who were both his understudies, Minter and McDonald, both preferred to play some of these amoeba defenses that people didn't expect, but they didn't send guys a lot. They more drop people back.
Well, and they didn't need to, right?
No, they didn't need to, because the defensive line had Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, and people like of that ilk. So there wasn't much need for it. But I think the question will be, when you've got a piece like Jayshawn Barham, when you've got a potential blitzer like Zeke Berry, do you see more aggression on second and third down?
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's go. National preview.
Now, maybe just a quick word on special teams, too, while we're at it. I think Michigan special teams are going to be a big unknown. Tommy Doman is back, but he never punted last year. So we think he's a pretty good punter. The hang time numbers and the pin numbers have been really good for Tommy Doman. Dominic Zavada comes in and transfers from Arkansas State, coincidentally enough, who's on the schedule this year. And then the kick returners, that we don't know.
Hoping to be Cole Cabana. I mean, we've talked about that in the previous episode to where he could be a spark kick returning because he's so flipping fast, man.
Yeah. But of course, how many kicks are even returned these days? The punt returner last year obviously was this rotation of Jake Thaw and Samaj Morgan, with a little bit more trust being given to Morgan as the season went on until the Rose Bowl.
Well, the Rose Bowl was a mess for everybody.
When Samaj had some problems and Jake Thaw saved the season. By just a matter of a yard or so. So uncertainty on that, but I think given Michigan's long-term history, J.B. Brown taking over for Jay Harbaugh, took over for John Baxter. Michigan has a good tradition of good special teams play, and they might need it this year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of 48-10 games in the schedule.
No.
All right, so National Outlook, top defenses as you see it around the country.
The one defensive line we talked about Florida State earlier, the one defensive line that could compete with Michigan and being the top dogs in the country would probably be Ohio State with all the guys they're returning. You look at Jack Sawyer and JTT, and
we're just going to abbreviate it JTT.
They are the Michigan from last year, this year in college football on the defensive line. They've got so much talent. It's just, you look there and there's an all Big Ten player, and there's an all Big Ten player. And you can say that about the whole team. But on the defensive line especially, it's going to be tough sledding trying to run the ball against these guys.
Caleb Downs comes in after being said by Nick Saban as potentially the best ever defensive back at Alabama. That's how good he thought that he was.
And, I think they still have Joe Zellberg. So it's just going to be the defense. The talent is there. It's just it's going to come down to coaching as it will with the entire Buckeye season, essentially. As for other defenses,
Georgia's going to be strong.
Georgia, they've always got incredible secondary. I think Malachi Starks is still there, the dude who saved or basically won the national championship from 3 years ago. They're always going to have, 5-star talent everywhere. Other than that, it's just, you kind of want to look at Iowa too. Under Phil Parker, they're always a team that you want to keep.
They're plug and play.
They're always very disciplined defense that won't let you get past 24 points a game. It's just, for them, it's going to come down to, can they score 24 points a game? That's how it has been for forever.
Brian Ferentz is gone, so.
Yeah, there are a few defenses around the country, and even Penn State's. Penn State always has a tough defense, especially last year. So I think it's going to be more of an offensive-heavy season this year for college football. A lot of points scored, even though with the rule change, I think it was last year where the clock keeps running after first rounds for most of the game.
Yeah.
I still think you're going to see a lot of barn burners today.
Okay.
This year.
So there's our look at the defense, and then next podcast is going to be game week. We're getting close.
Picks against the spread.
And maybe a few national predictions as well. But
yeah.
My voice is shot. I've got a bug. Sorry about all the coughing. We'll try to be better next time.
Yeah.
Till then, I'm the preacher.
I'm the prodigy.
Peace.
See you next time. Peace.